You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 82. Today I'll be talking to Miles Johnston. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairdspodcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Miles Johnston. Miles creates incredibly surreal pencil drawings and paintings, often involving figures who are exhibiting stunning transformations. We talk about what he's trying to communicate through his work on the show. We also talk about how Miles was first inspired to become an artist, his upcoming solo show at Harmon Projects, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Miles Johnston. Miles, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on, man.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Always fun to get an opportunity to talk about painting and drawing and all of this.
Yeah. So before we dive into your background, I wanted to sort of give you a late congratulations, because I know you spent the last year or more learning to be a new dad, right? What has that been like?
It's made the art stuff look easy in some ways. It has been all the. I mean, we were trying for one and we got two, so it's been an amazing crash course in parenting, and it's made me very appreciative to live in a country that has quite generous parental leave and, you know, social fabric to make it. I don't know how people do it in where you've got to go back to work and everything, because I mean they're 19 months now, year and a half, and they started daycare a couple of months ago, and pretty much up until then. I sort of slowly eased into a little bit of work after they turned one. But I basically took a whole year off, I think, because we could, and there was, you know, you realized why you were paying the high Swedish taxes. They'll match you. I'm not even a citizen, and they'll match your salary for hundreds of days if you have twins, or 80% of your salary. And I'm really grateful for the chance to have been like so there for all of it. And it was extremely a total disassembling of my identity, because I've spent the last 16 years really just fully more and more building my identity around making art. And, it's made me realize the sort of unhealthy relationship that I had with my self-esteem and all of this. And suddenly I'm not sleeping, and I've got these totally life-altering new roles to grow into, and I'm not doing any of my normal things that I do to sort of, that I've sort of learned is how I, get through life in the world. And but it's been beautiful. I think ultimately there's not really many other things that would make me would have made me take such a big pause, and that's been kind of a big gift in a way. And now I'm slowly getting back online as a creative person. It's coming back in, and it's a weird feeling. Sometimes I look at my work from before, and there are certain themes and elements of it I just barely identify with anymore. But I don't quite know. I haven't found how to express a lot of the new experiences yet either. So it's kind of a strange, frustrating and difficult place, where I strongly feel the pressure. I got to be a provider. I got to get going. But I still, a lot of stuff, I don't want to just feel like I'm doing an impression of my old self. But it's exciting. I've got a few things now I'm getting into, and I was grateful to do this recent commission that gave me an excuse to get drawing.
Nice. Well, and also just like the responsibility of the well-being and development of these tiny human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's an enormous thing to carry on your shoulders, you know?
Yeah. Well, in a weird way, because I've gone through periods in my life where I've really been through some poor mental health patches, you know, in my 20s with, in hindsight, pretty bad, like regular panic attacks and stuff. And, you know, and I learned how to get over that, but I've always been slightly prone to the anxiety and depression side of things and overthinking stuff. And there's something about having kids that is so huge and so demanding of your time that is kind of teaching me to let go of some of that. Like if you had asked me before, one of my biggest fears was actually just, you know, it's one thing to be like falling apart if you're on your own, but it's another when you're needed as a, you know, in a provider parental role, but somehow it does kind of invite you into that. And, you know, there have been some I found the sleep deprivation, frankly, just the practical realities of twins the hardest. I mean, it was just like the first 4 months, we never slept more than 2 hours at a time because they're eating every 3 hours and you both need to be up for all the feeding. So life became this strange series of 3-hour sections, right. You know, of feeding, getting into sleep, one of them sleeping, the other's not sleeping, taking turns staying up at strange hours of it, like really getting to know 3 a.m. as a time. Right. You know, doing really deranged behavior, walking a stroll around the outside of a graveyard in the middle of the night because they fall asleep in it better and it's easier than having them crying in the kitchen. But yeah, it's been actually one of the weirdest things is it made me realize I was so addicted to the validation of social media in a way that embarrassed me to think about. And now I'm finding it hard to make myself. I do actually need to do more of that because it's part of running the business of being an artist. And I think because I've like a lot of people, you know, you repost work if it takes you a long time. I'll open up Instagram and I haven't made that much new. And I'll go to share something that I've shared 10 times. And I just think, no one needs to see this anymore. And it's sort of, it's a weird feeling. I just sort of like, oh, well, okay, I guess. But I do need to sort of like, get everything going again, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's interesting though that the positive impacts just on mental health and everything, like almost like having children as a form of therapy, you know, which is a strange outcome, but a reckless
form, because you really do feel that it could break you. Like that's the scary thing. It brings up a lot of dark feelings, you know, a lot of scary stuff too. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life, but I think I always knew deep down it was something I wanted to do. And it just suddenly felt like it was the time, you know?
Awesome. And so you yourself were born in the UK, but only spent a few years there before moving to Borneo and then back to England ultimately. So like what motivated those moves when you were so young?
That was my dad's work. Yeah. The company he worked for offered him a position in Brunei. And I think it was just like part of it was that they would, you know, help get us a house and a school and stuff. And yeah, pretty amazing in hindsight. You know, I wish I often think about if it'll be possible in a few years to provide a similar experience for them. It was really amazing to just be in a completely different culture, geographic, climate, everything context for a while. And I sometimes wonder if it kind of, because those are very like formative years, that kind of when your memories begin. Yeah, I remember really just fragments from before there. So my first memories are all in this. They feel quite dreamlike to me now. You know, I'll be remembering like, pulling up to a friend's house and there were like monkeys all over the driveway, and it sort of all feels like a weird fever dream because it's so long ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, because like I often wonder, like, how often, I mean, I guess it's different for everybody, just how often, I mean, like, how early do people's memories form? And if it was only, you were only a couple years old, did you even have any substantive memories of that period of your life?
It's one of the things I think about when I'm with my kids, because they're so present in a way that I hadn't, like children, like young babies, no one really, I'm the youngest brother and none of the cousins or anyone close to me had a baby. So that in a way, I had had one friend and some other extended family in the couple years before where I'd met some babies again. But this was kind of the first time I'd really spent serious time around a baby as an adult. And, you're blown away by the sense that they're fully there with you in that experience. And it's just so weird to think like this is just not really being written to at least episodic memory. They have some kind of memory because they're remembering you and objects and new words and foods and flavors and stuff. They remember a lot, but you know that it won't be that kind of, episodic memory. And there's something quite strange about being with someone who's like less distracted than you, but is not recording it, It really sort of solidifies that feeling of that those connections you're having with them are going to probably really imprint on their identity in a kind of core sense of how they feel secure and in the world, but not in a kind of very, you want to make a good moment for them so that the moment is good, not so that they have a good memory, and I think that's kind of a beautiful lesson.
For sure. And it's like the consistency of those moments over time that build the person ultimately,
Yeah.
So you mentioned your father and his work being the reason for you guys moving. What kind of work did your parents do? Anything like on the creative side?
My mom is very creative. She's, I think she went to art school for a year, but in a kind of, as many creative people do, and I think pre-internet, it was just kind of basically impressed upon her that it wasn't really a path forwards. It was like a cool thing to do, but it was time to do a different degree. But growing up, she very much always like organized tons of creative things for me and my brother to do. She would be sort of just getting out different art mediums, watercolors, or like silk painting fish for Christmas cards, or like just doing a lot of that kind of stuff with us, encouraging us to write. And my dad was he has a strong appreciation for creative things. A lot of my music taste was really like foundationally from the music he would be playing, and into film and books and stuff like that. And I think he played a bit of bass. Maybe he was even in a band in uni, but it was more. I would say it was a household where there was a lot of talking about creative expression, at least. More like pop cultural stuff. We weren't, sitting around listening to classical music or discussing, Russian literature or something. But it's a big part of what motivates me to make art, and the kind of art I like to do.
So was it your mother's creativity and her like fostering that environment within your home that originally kind of inspired you to become an artist, or was it some other kind of, I guess, inspiration that sparked your creativity?
Yeah, it's just a gradual process. Well, I was always like one of those kids who drew a lot, but I think I have memories of giving sort of like hilariously cynical answers. People would be like, "Oh, that's nice in school. Are you going to be an artist when you're older?" And I'd be like, "Well, no, it's not really a job, is it? But maybe I'll be an architect because I like maths and my granddad's an architect." That was what I always said I'd be, because I liked some of the STEM stuff, and my granddad was an architect, and so I think already at a young age I was like, that's not a real job, is it? So it's funny. But no, I always drew a lot, but not in a like super hardcore way. It was just like one of the things I would like to do among many. I think all kids draw, most kids draw to some extent, and then most people kind of stop at a fairly young age. And I have like some of my earliest drawing memories. I had this friend who lived up the road from me who was also like a drawing kid, and we would just sit around. Like I have like memories of like copying the DVD cover of The Matrix,
Oh, nice.
doing my perfect little Keanu Reeves in pencil, or buying like Xbox magazines and doing a little Master Chief, really cool stuff like that. And it's really, really the synthesis where it occurred to me it could be a job was when I was about 13. I stumbled from playing video games. I remember I was really into Unreal Tournament, and I was like, who's making these cool armor designs? Who's doing these shoulder pads? These are great. And I found the artist, Justin Hawkins, I believe is his name. And on his website, he had a tab called concept art, and I'd never really heard of concept art. So I think I just, Googled concept art and found the forum conceptart.org back in 2006. And I feel like, everyone always says you just missed the golden age, but in my mind, I arrived at a really good time on the internet where if you found a forum of people who were very geeky around a topic, it was just a totally different thing to the kind of social media thing. It was much more about participating in a community. That there wasn't the sense that you were playing the kind of lottery game to become famous. Like, if I do this well enough, I can get internet fame and that could lead to money or a job. It was the first time I saw a bunch of working professional artists who were drawing in a way that was like blowing my mind. And they were all saying, this is a skill that I've learned and this is how you can learn it. Like, people were sharing books to read, telling you how to like study anatomy, about perspective, and kind of, breaking down the mystery of making art into learnable skills, which many people still don't know. Like, I think in my head, I thought, I'm a little better at drawing than some people, and some people were just born as good as those people you see in the museums. Like, it really like connected for me at that age. Like, oh, I can get better at this. But I don't think I instantly thought like, okay, I'm going to be like a fine artist. But I think I started thinking that I wanted to work in concept art or games or something, because for me, it represented like a career where I could be drawing all the time. And so there was this thing where you would make a sketchbook, which was a thread on there where you would just post everything you were drawing. You would post your finished work and then your studies, and people would sort of come in and in the spirit of the forum, or the ideal, it wasn't always like this, but the goal was for it to be about constructive criticism. And it had all of its weird idiosyncrasies of a community and random hatred of anime that seems really weird now in hindsight, because they didn't want to be deviant art and all of this dumb stuff. But yeah, there were just a bunch of people on there who you could go and you could see page 1, 2 years ago dated, and they're drawing in a way that you can relate to. And then you skip forwards, they've been doing this for 3 years, posting nearly every day, and suddenly they have like incredible skills. And that just like, I'm so grateful that clicked with me. And for whatever reason, because I had plenty of hobbies that I got into and then dropped, I just started doing it like basically every day after school. I would sort of kind of obsessively needed to update my thread several times a week. And after about 5 years passed and it was time for me to go to university, all of that practice had really added up, and all the, amazing artists who had come in and given me like free advice. I really feel bad for younger artists that that isn't still a thing, because I really think it was a genuinely positive use of the internet. Right. That like, I'm so grateful for what it, gave me and set me up with.
Yeah, those early 2000s, like forum culture. Like I was really into comic books back then. There were several comic book forums, and it's just all up. And to your point, it wasn't about becoming internet famous or any kind of notoriety. It was just a shared passion that everybody had for these things, and there was so much like depth of knowledge through the membership and everybody kind of collaborating in this forum environment. And you just don't see that as much anymore. Some of that kind of went a little bit to Reddit and some other places like scattered around, but these kind of mega social media platforms, I feel have ruined, or I guess displaced some of those communities in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and one of the ways I feel I was very lucky is that the forum model was perfect for learning, and at the stage in my life where I then needed to get my work to be seen by a general audience, it's like I got on Instagram early-ish. And it sort of feels like, bizarrely, my life synchronized quite well. It's just like one of those bits of luck out of your control, and then things switch to a place where, because I kind of accidentally ended up with a career in fine art. Instead of university, I went to study at what's called an atelier, which I'm sure some people know, but for those who don't, in brief, there's just like a few schools around the world, quite a few now, that sort of teach in the kind of 19th century atelier tradition. So it's you basically don't do any coursework or anything like that. Like, it's all practical, hands-on drawing, life drawing, and the instruction is teachers coming around and looking at your projects as you're working on them and helping you learn to draw more realistically from life. So I did 3 years. It was only going to be 1 year, and then I just really didn't want to leave, and we found a way to make it work. So that's where you're doing like 60-hour poses from the model. Like, you know, you're coming in 5 mornings a week and seeing the same pose for like 4 weeks. And then I ended up teaching there for a long time. So that's a big part of where the sort of like realism comes from me, is like from like really long hours of life drawing. And it was during that process that I realized more and more, I think, as I realized what being a concept artist really was, which is that you are in a collaborative pipeline to be creating, you know, this group project. I think I realized that I wanted to be making things that were the end in and of themselves. I wanted to be making paintings that were to be looked at just as a painting. And I actually had spent all this time training and basically none of it focusing on skills that would have actually been way more relevant for being a concept artist. You know, if you apply to a game studio and you're like, look, if you sit me in front of a woman for 5 weeks, I can give you a really realistic drawing. Yeah, that is not particularly helpful for, like, you know, the skills associated with being a concept artist, which tons of my friends did come out of ateliers and do that. And I think those people are some of the most talented artists alive today. But I just realized more and more it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I didn't really know the gallery world is very intimidating and opaque from the outside. No idea how that was going to happen. But I just this is now like, when I've graduated, I've been drawing for like 11 years at this point and working various jobs, you know, doing some in-house contract work. You know, I was painting portraits for like online poker slots and, you know, doing various commissions for fantasy mobile games, you know, all the kind of stuff that gets you started, or maybe used to. It was probably mid-journey now, but...
Is that while you were in school still, or was this after you finished the 3 years?
Well, during and after. That part of how I got through the atelier was like trying to cover my living costs, and my parents helped me with tuition, which again, so there's plenty of good luck and good fortune in my sort of background as well. But so I did that for a little bit, and then I had this time in 2015 where I basically emailed my school, who had just moved from Stockholm to a small town on the southern coast of Sweden, into a beautiful old school building. I basically emailed them, and I was like, because they always have alumni come back and, you know, talk to some students, show them the work they're doing, hang out, maybe help with some teaching. And I'd done a little bit of that in my third year. They'll have third year students help with the new students as well. So there's more like, you know, variety of people critiquing or whatever. And I basically, said, can I come back and stay for a month? And they were like, sure. And then by the time the month was up, I just looked at them. I said, please, I can't go back. I'm back in the art cult. There's 30 people here and all we want to talk about is drawing, and London rent is so expensive. And I was like, I'll do anything. I'll help instruct. Just, can I not go? And they were like, yeah, sure. You know, help out a bit. And that gradually escalated into becoming an instructor there. But the way that works is that I would do 2 weeks on, 4 weeks off while other instructors were teaching. And just at that time, and in a small town, I could cover my living costs from that part-time work. So I just told myself, okay, for a year or two, you know, I'm 22 now, like at the time, not now, unfortunately. And I said, somehow 8 more years have passed, but I was like, this is the first time where I'm not going to be doing commission. I'm not in high school. I'm not in the atelier. Like, I'll have months at a time to just make stuff I want to make and see what happens. And within a couple of years of that, and starting to trying to finally combine all of that practice and training and actually combining it with making work that I cared about, I was kind of surprised by how it started to kind of snowball online a bit. And that's why I say it accidentally became a job, because I didn't really have a good plan, but suddenly enough people were saying like, hey, can we get some prints? And then I would, experiment with doing like a small print run. And I would be surprised to find that it was like covering a month of living now, and was as much as some of the bad commissions I've been doing. And I was thinking, hey, like, do I want to work for someone else doing a job I don't want to do, or do I want to draw what I want to draw, and then somehow, have it become a way to support myself? And then at a certain point, galleries kind of reached out to me, and I still have a very like, with family, especially now, it feels quite scary. Like, to me, it feels very precarious. Like, there's never a sense that anything is like really guaranteed. I'm trying to relax and tell myself, like, I've been making it work for a certain amount of years now, and like, I really feel like I should be able to keep this as a career.
Right. But
I'm extremely grateful to anyone who's ever collected a print or an original or shown any interest, because it truly directly has allowed me to keep making this work. So it's it means a lot to me.
And you mentioned like the 2015, 2016 timeframe was when it really started to take off. But according to your CV, it seemed like you started showing your work, at least in group shows, around 2013 with Spoke Art and Hashimoto. How did you first connect with Ken and start showing in his galleries?
Most of them were through, I think they're pretty much all Moleskine project things.
Oh, okay.
They're big group exhibitions. And there's a guy called Rodrigo Luff, a great artist from Australia. And I think he was quite instrumental in organizing them early on, at least. I'm not sure anymore. He might still be. I just don't know. And he was just someone I had talked to on forums. He'd been on conceptart.org. I mean, like, that's the other side of forums that is amazing. Like, I would say every single job I landed, everything like that, emerged out of people where we authentically met as friends before any of us were good or had any job opportunities or anything. And then, you all stick to it. A lot of people fall away. And those people are just they become like, if I was offered a job and I couldn't have it, I would always find someone else, because like, I think that's one of the other things about like the modern internet is everyone's always suspicious of new interactions. It's, there's always this sense that you're trying to get someone else to help promote your thing. It's hard to know that you're having a real sort of authentic interaction with someone. So it's another thing I miss about the forums, is there was a real sense of like camaraderie about it, at least from my perspective. So yeah, I did. There were a few group shows and stuff like that, but.
And then that led to, I think, a 2018 solo show at Last Rites Gallery in New York.
Yeah.
What led to that first solo show with them? How did that ultimately manifest? Yeah,
that was part of, that's what I mean when I say it happened so quickly, because this was like 2016, 2015. 2016 is the year where I feel like I really started to develop my voice. And then 2017 is where I start making pieces that I still like to put in my portfolio today. That's where there's ones that I still like. At some point, it's like I can see the ways I'm getting better, but they're kind of irrelevant to the audience now. I feel like after a certain point, people don't really care how well it's drawn. It's really just the idea quality, and that's just out of my control. I don't feel like I control that. So, it started as a group show with them, with Last Rites, and then the gallery owner saw some of them in person and really liked them and basically offered a solo. And I remember thinking, because in my head that was like on my like 5 to 10 year goal, that I didn't know how that happened. And then it sort of just that's the weird thing about the gallery world, is all it takes is the right person wanting to do it. And something I really learned when I went out there for the solo show, which was an amazing experience, I'm very grateful for. But when I was there in the week and helping them hang the show and seeing what a gallery director's schedule looked like, I kind of realized why they're impossible to get a hold of. Because like, it's an extremely busy job. You're setting up the current show, you're managing, inventory, and every day that email inbox is, did this thing I shipped arrive? Is this person buying, chasing up on buyers, like all the stuff artists don't like to do. That's why you pay them commission.
Right.
And I remember there was like one little time slot where I was watching and he got a chance to look at his email inbox, and you open it and it was like 30 portfolio submissions. And I'm sure that many were coming in every day. And I was just like, he doesn't have time to look at that. And I got the sense that really nowadays there are gallery assistants, there are other artists coming in. And I think they're listening much more to in-person recommendations. Like maybe if they hear your name a few times from, have you seen this person's work? Have you heard about this? And they hear it 3 times. I think that's the kind of stuff that leads to people reaching out much more often than I tried when I was 21 living in London. I tried just going to some galleries that like literally showed up with a sketchbook. But every time what would happen, I would stand around awkwardly in the gallery, like psyching myself up, like I was going to ask someone on a date, probably looking completely deranged. And then I would go over, I love the show. I'm actually an artist myself. Like maybe I was just hoping maybe I could show you some stuff, and I'd show it and they'd be like, oh yeah, cool. And then I would suddenly realize like the person manning the gallery, this isn't the person making this decision. I'd be like, thanks for showing me. And then I'd
cool stuff.
walk away feeling like an idiot.
Nice.
I always tell students that because you can never recreate it, the more you talk to different artists who have ended up being successful, the more you realize that their path to some kind of career is completely arbitrary and individual and unrepeatable and filled with coincidences and stuff. But what you find in common is certain principles about their commitment to making the work, to improving the quality of it, to kind of relentlessly pursuing it. There's a huge amount of luck. There's so much stuff I can't take credit for that I'm like very aware, And there's also survivorship bias. I have no idea if there's probably many people out there doing all the right things for whom it just doesn't work, and then life catches, like at some point eventually adult life kind of catches up. You do need to pay bills. You can't be like bugging your parents to live at home forever. But I think your best shot has to come from, the biggest thing about making art is that no one's ever going to wake you up in the morning and say it's time to get to the studio and time to get creating. And the thing that I did that I feel like I can take credit for is that for all those years when I was studying, when I was in school, when I was busy, I always made sure that there was a part of my life that was just creating stuff that I wanted to make, like not aiming for a job, not for a portfolio, not for school. But I made sure that I was just keeping that relationship that I make art for me alive, and very, very obsessive about how to do it better. Taking responsibility for if this doesn't connect with people, it's on me to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, and so with the we talked a little bit earlier about the growth of like the bad aspects of the growth of social media. Do you think there are like people with a large following, people that have managed to gain a large community around their work on social media platforms, do you feel like it changes the relationship or the need for galleries, or do you still think that's an important component to your career regardless, and that social media is just augmenting that relationship?
That is a question I ask myself all the time, and I've tried to get a bit bolder with even asking gallerists, because like you look at the sticker price on a painting and then you think about half going to the gallerist and then the tax rate wherever you live, you're seeing a 30% fraction of that sticker price optimistically. In Sweden, 25% probably. And yeah, if you could sell it for the same price directly to a collector, you're going to keep much more of that. I think one thing that I really value is that I really think traditional art is meant to be seen in person. It's just fundamentally different seeing work on a smartphone to seeing the real thing. The scale, like if I could have my dream career, it would be, I think every artist dreams of their work just being hung in a public place. Like I'm very grateful for people for buying paintings, but it's always kind of your secret wish that in a few generations the grandkids don't care about it so much and it ends up in a museum. That's like best case scenario, because you just want your work to be able to be seen by people and experienced. If you forget the economic reality of the world we live in, that's what I care about is that people get to see it. and ideally for free, you know. The question for me from a career standpoint that I'm trying to ask myself is whether there's a kind of effective upper limit on how much work can sell for directly. I wonder if to really, like, oil paintings should be expensive. They're massively labor intensive. They cost hundreds or thousands of dollars in materials if they're big. Shipping them costs absurd amounts. Shipping large oil paintings is depressing. You know, it's like when I'm preparing for a solo show, you're going to be spending $3,000 on shipping probably to get things out to America from here safely. And I just feel like maybe, I don't know if a buyer is ever going to want to spend $30,000 on a painting. Or I look at someone like Mark Maggiore, who just had his show with things selling at auction for, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's very hard for me to imagine that happening through Instagram DMs or an email exchange. Like, I do wonder if the kind of clientele for those paintings and that kind of market is perhaps still locked behind the gallery. But these are all open questions for me. You know, it was very weird watching. I mean, the whole art world was shook watching the sort of NFT thing. And so, you know, you know, it makes you realize, you know, suddenly if people have made money in crypto and it's not $300,000, it's 200 ETH that they invested in 20 years ago. Like, it's all contextual, and they're just paying for for an address on a blockchain. Like, it really sort of broke my mind around, because as an artist, you're often thinking about, part of you feels guilty selling stuff for a lot of money. You spend a lot of your life quite broke. It's weird to ask someone to pay a year's rent for a painting. And it's very hard for you to empathize as a young artist that there's someone who works in tech for whom this is like, you know, they're spending money for a month of their salary, or someone in finance. And then there's part of you that feels like, I'm grateful they're buying it. But like I said, like in a dream world, the work is just publicly available. But especially now with a family, I do feel a little bit mercenary about, like, I have to make the moves that set up some sense of security for raising these children. And I can't change the world fundamentally overnight. So that might be disappointing to some people, I don't know. But to me, it feels like just a kind of part of the role I have to play to make sure I can continue to make artwork. I sort of feel like I owe it to the creative part of myself that doesn't care about the money and just wants to sit in a room drawing. Like, that guy is not going to actually be able to keep the bills on the studio paid. And there's part of me that feels like I have to play two very different roles between, like, negotiating with galleries and pricing work and all of that. But I do get the sense, I'm sure someone will come along and prove this wrong, but I do get the sense that the gallery does a lot for reaching that kind of market. And ideally, the kind of, I'm preparing for a solo show with Ken next year. It was going to be this year, but everything got pushed back with the twins. And, you know, I tried to have this conversation with him, and I really respect him. He's been great to work with so far. And part of what he was offering in exchange is that galleries can also do things like get you into art fairs, or have, you know, showings of your work at museums, or they're helping me publish a hardback book. And basically he's saying these are the kind of services we can do to make our relationship feel like we're properly investing in you. And I didn't realize how, like, you can't go to a Miami art booth on your own
and just show up. Yeah.
and it costs a gallery to take 5 or 6 artists. It costs them like 30, 40 grand sometimes, transporting everything, buying the booth space, paying the staff to be there. And that fundamentally gets your work shown in a totally different kind of. So I'm trying out the kind of gallery game. And yeah, I think it's worth trying to have the confidence to ask that question, though, as an artist, to say, like, I do know that there are people who will buy my work at my current prices directly. So,
well, it also speaks to, like, the need for finding a gallery that will do that extra legwork, like Ken, like ThinkSpace, like a lot of the galleries that we've talked about before, because there's a lot out there that don't do that. So, like, identifying the gallery that is going to fill the gap that would be hard to fill yourself, I think, is a necessary thing also.
I think there are a lot of smaller galleries that kind of operate on the predatory model that, like, artists fundamentally desire to have a show. It feels really good to have that night you can invite people to. But if you look at the models and ways that some galleries are set up, I feel like they're not really taking on any significant risk. And a lot of the time, the artist ends up kind of paying a huge amount of money to get to role play as having a gallery show. And I feel like that's kind of fundamentally unfair. And I think as time goes on, and the internet is making it easier to buy art, the galleries that survive, it's my hope, will be the ones who really invest in their artists, because people do just start to realize there are so many young artists who are making a really great living through things like Patreon and print releases and all kinds of other stuff. And more, they're not going to want to give away 50% to not feel like they're getting anything in return. But like galleries and selling originals is actually quite a small part of my income, really. It's the limited print releases that it's much easier with the internet to sell 100 times more prints than you did a few years ago than it is to sell your work for 100 times
right.
what it was worth a few years ago. Like that to me feels very Game of Thronesy when I see artists who were in galleries and somehow the work is now selling for like $1 million. Like part of me feels like I don't know how that happens to you. I don't know what causes that, but there's something I like about making work that just speaks to enough people who want to, buying it. I think when someone buys a print for $100, they understand that is a significant markup on the cost of printing or the cost of materials. But there's a kind of, you do things to ensure its value as a collector's item. They're signed, they're numbered, they're in a limited run. If you're lucky, they'll become a kind of secondary market, so people can sometimes, resell. I think some people collect prints like a kind of sophisticated Pokemon cards or something. It's kind of a fun hobby to trade them and decide what you're going to have up on the wall. But I hope a lot of people also realize that a large amount of that it's kind of, I don't think of it as deceptive. When I buy a print from someone else, I feel like I'm fortunate enough that month to help support them in doing the work that I love to see. And, I might only buy one print that year, but I feel like I know it was a big markup. I know there's also a lot of labor in doing it, but I feel like I know what I'm paying for, which is ultimately that I want that person to be able to keep making the artwork that I like to see. So that's the way if I could be fully transparent, that's how I think about prints, is that it's a collector's thing. You get something beautiful on your wall, and it's a direct way to subsidize an artist if you're fortunate enough to be able to do that at that point in time.
And it's also more accessible, for people that wouldn't necessarily have the funds to pay for an original. They can still hang a piece of art that they like on their wall, through these prints. Yeah.
It's a long time. I mean, you read about people like Zorn or something, and etchings was a big one for a lot of these 19th century paintings. There's up north in Sweden, there's in Dalarna, there's this. Do you know Anders Zorn?
No, I think so.
He's an amazing, he's like a sort of sergeant type painter from Sweden. And there's also Carl Larsson, who's a very famous Swedish artist. And they have quite different styles, and they had very different families. Carl Larsson, Zorn and his wife didn't have any kids, and they lived in this Viking house, the first house in town with electricity. And I went to visit it. He's got this massive Viking hall with a billiards table. You just get this feeling that the best parties in 1900 were happening there. And Carl Larsson had this kind of, his wife was this incredible designer as well, and their home is kind of like, they had this large family, and she made all the furniture and stained glass windows in the house, and another beautiful house. But part of the exhibition they had on their friendship had the Christmas cards they would send each other. And it was such a hilarious insight into how they talked to each other behind the scenes, because they were quite different people. And one Christmas card had this picture of Zorn coming back from America with a big bag of cash over his back with a US dollar symbol on it and a little robbery mask. And it was him coming back with his etching money, because his etching sold so well out there. So they were always joking that Zorn's coming back with the dollars from the USA on his print sales.
That's funny. But yeah, I mean, it's a totally different, I think, side of the market that some artists just don't tap into, but can, expose your work to a whole group of people that may not otherwise have the funds to support it, you know?
The thing that is so frustrating about it, like many things in art, is it doesn't feel like there's much middle ground. It feels like prints either find their audience and can be like the bread and butter if you're keeping the lights on, or they sell like two. You know, it's really hard to figure out. It is a depressingly unequal distribution as a field. You know, artists. I mean, there isn't sort of like a smooth curve. You get the sense that it very much ends up being a very like winner take all economy, and I think that's what I find so terrifying about it, and why I'm always perpetually grateful for any year where it is working. Because at this point in my life, I've truly gone all in on this. I don't really know how to do anything else, and that'll be my 3 a.m. fear. Will just be like, what would I do if I really, you know, got to a month where I can't pay salary, and like I don't know what else to do. So that is what keeps me coming in and trying to like. But weirdly, those kind of thoughts are extremely unhelpful for making anything decent, because like that just puts you in a kind of feverish, manic, oh, what do people want to see state. And that is never how you make anything sincere and honest and whatever. That's why I say it's fundamentally two roles. I have to be a bit of a sleazy salesman in one role, but he's doing it for a good cause.
Yeah, you got 2 kids now too.
Yeah, but even before then, you deserve to eat, you know, you deserve to be able to live.
So speaking of like the themes and how, you know, too much focus on social media and the audience can corrupt some of those themes, I think this might be a good segue to dive into the themes of the work that you make. And, you know, having observed the work over the course of your portfolio, very, you know, extremely surreal, almost dreamlike, sometimes verging on nightmare, you know, sort of like Junji Ito influence. I mean, and especially in the way that like Junji Ito will creatively transform a human body. Like I see a lot of that in your work too, like the creative transformation of the human figure. So I guess, do you kind of see your work in that way, where it is sort of this, you know, dark surrealism, dreamlike aesthetic?
I mean, definitely. Yeah, I can see how all of those things apply. I think there's something I'm aspiring to that I hit in some of my work and not in other of my work. And I'm actually less keen on the stuff that feels too leaning into shock, horror, needlessly. And not because it's bad, but just because I sometimes, it doesn't feel like the most close to what I'm trying to express. Yeah, the Junji Ito thing, he's one of those artists where I discovered his work after I had already been doing stuff that looked, you know, there's only so many, when it comes to surrealism or, you know, making transformations on the body and stuff, he's one of these artists who is so prolific and has done so many things. I haven't really read much of him, partially because when I discovered him, I kept finding things that looked so similar. I felt like, well, if I read this guy, I'm worried that I'm just going to get stressed about... Like there's kind of a sense of like, if I accidentally come up with an idea that's already been done, but I came up with it on my own, and then someone shows me that it looks like something else, I don't feel bad about that because it's just like parallel thinking. But I worry when I see someone who operates in similar areas that I like to draw in, then I almost don't want to look at it because I fear it's closing off areas that I would like to explore on my own. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like, things that you might have arrived at naturally, but now you can't go to because you've seen it in
or something similar.
Work.
Yeah, there was definitely in some of my early one of the only short stories I'd read of his was The Curse of Amigara Fault, where it has the silhouette in the rock that everyone finds they have a kind of unique hole that is made for them, and there's definitely some of that in a lot of my earlier work. I found. There's quite a few of my things where I'm playing with outline or silhouette or parts of the body becoming like impossible spaces that I'm sure that was in there, you know, as part of the inspiration. But when I look at his work, I always feel like while there are definite similarities that I can appreciate, I do feel like we fundamentally communicate quite different vibes to our work. Like I don't get the feeling, and of course he's a storyteller, you know, his things are all part of a narrative. And I think, whereas I'm trying to make images that kind of just have some kind of interesting like resonance on them. So I feel like for me, a big part of when something feels too close as an influence is when you genuinely feel like this could just be part of the other artist's canon, and you're just kind of doing the ones they haven't found. But if it's ultimately has similarities and influence, but is kind of exploring its own terrain, then I think that's just kind of part of making art, you know. From my perspective, a lot of the artists that really had an influence on me were Alphonse Mucha, for his sheer like perfection of drawing ability. I really can't think of many people who I think are like a better draftsperson. Beksinski definitely has a bit of the nightmare aspect. I just remember really being surprised by how haunting and atmospheric his work was. It hit me in the same way that music can, where I felt like I found it extremely powerful. I went to an exhibition of a Czech artist called František Kupka on a trip to Prague when I was younger, and he had a lot of he had such an interesting career because he started as almost like a pre-Raphaelite cheesy painter and slowly kind of descended into all kinds of abstraction and surrealism in many phases, and ended up doing basically purely abstract works that you can tell are from someone who can really draw realistically. They have strong senses of space and texture and movement. But in the in-between stages, he has all these kind of incredible feats of imagination. So he was a big influence. And then a lot of it is music. I think what I realized was that growing up as a kind of non-religious person, but someone a little bit existentially inclined to the sudden fear of, oh my God, I'm in a body, I'm human, I'm going to age, I'm going to die. All the kind of longing and fear and all these things that people feel. I realized that a lot of my friends and me and my brother, we found it maybe hard to talk about this stuff directly, but we would almost talk around it by sharing music and film and comics and stuff we were into. And I realized a huge amount of how I didn't look for answers in artwork, but I found it immensely comforting to see other people just posing the same question and just knowing that that was part of my humanness, you know, to sort of see that other people just feel that fear in the middle of the night about, you know, who am I? Or felt the kind of longing in romance or the kind of just weirdness or strangeness about the world. And I was very obsessed in a sense with the transcendent, with things that made you feel a sense of looking behind the curtain, whether it was an interest in like mathematics and physics when I was younger, or philosophy, or just anything that kind of had that whiff of like peeking behind the veil, you know. And I think after years of learning to draw, I just started trying to, I always felt internally that I had all these feelings and thoughts and things that I felt very intensely. And then I was looking at my work and I was like, I'm painting elves for like a fantasy game I don't play. And I was like, and I've spent so long trying to learn to draw. If I could do something that could even be a fraction of what many works of art or songs or whatever have offered to me, which is the real like experience of listening to art and getting something from it that really means something to you, the stuff you actually think about. And so that's what I started challenging myself, was like, none of my work is meant to be telling you how to live, telling you how to feel about anything, offering you any kind of answers or closure. But it's just the simple comfort of like sitting with a friend and being like, yeah, no, I know that too. I know that feeling as well. And I think that's often what I'm trying to do with my artwork, is just, and so obviously there is sometimes quite a lot of darkness in there, because I think that's the stuff that I get stuck on. But I think I'm quite an optimistic person. You know, I ultimately sort of believe it's a very good thing to be alive. So for me, I often think that is what the realism does in my work, is that it offers, it sort of communicates that this idea was worth spending hundreds of hours making and carefully, And it was worth me drawing these plants beautifully, so you could think how beautiful plants look in the rain, or you could feel, like the person's fingers bunching in the sand. These small experiences that make life worth living because they are not in your thinking mind. The sound of waves crashing on a shore, or the feeling of like sun through the fog. It's like all my works are about finding some figurative moment that I don't even necessarily need to know what it means. I just need to know as I'm sketching that I have a sense that there's some kind of meaning I'm trying to project onto there, but I'm not sure what it is. Or it has an irony or a kind of, something to it. And then I try to build up everything else in the picture to kind of support the vibe and the mood. I want the light to have that kind of dramatic staged lighting, a moment in life where you sort of connect to the aesthetic qualities of the world. It's not just light because there has to be a light source from somewhere. The light should be selling the drama of the form and fitting the mood. And there's always I want an image that's fairly simple, fairly easy to read compositionally. It's not like a huge narrative thing with 100 figures. I think partially because I couldn't do that. I'm not that good at drawing, but also because it's just more fun for me. Like at some point I start realizing I'm trying to make a drawing harder because I think it'll impress other artists. And usually my best ideas are actually fairly simple, but they're like effective.
So it's less about telling a story or trying to communicate a narrative, and more about establishing like a feeling and an emotion, like getting the viewer invested emotionally in the work.
Yeah. It sounds pretentious, but like if some paintings are narrative or a novel or a short story, then it's definitely more like poetry. It's arranging elements that somehow have a kind of emergent meaning that is maybe not very easy to pin down directly. And I do think sometimes I do a disservice because I often have to write stuff about my work, and it is always tempting to just write like, it means whatever you feel when you look at it.
Right.
I do feel like there is a text. When I go to a museum, I always read the little panels, and sometimes just one sentence, it just nudges you to look at the work in the right way. I feel like it can be done skillfully in a way that very much enhances the experience of looking at the artwork. I do think sometimes I maybe too much give my own narrative and then box it in. But I don't feel like generally most people I see are still capable of being like, oh, interesting that it meant that to you. It means this to me. And I think I always try to reinforce that there isn't a canonical interpretation. And I almost think if it's when I'm sketching, what I'm looking for is ideas that feel kind of like very fertile for projecting meaning onto. There's a strong sense that it's not just surrealism where you juxtapose like elements that don't belong together normally. And it's like, oh, it's weird. There's a worm coming out of an egg playing a saxophone. Like to me, it's like, it's quite hard to find the images that are unexpected, have a kind of surrealism about them, but you still kind of get the sense that it's saying something to you. And I feel it's most successful when I see two people with totally different interpretations who are convinced that they are seeing the obvious meaning. And then I feel like, yes, good, good.
That's awesome.
Like people are having that, because that's when a painting, music is like, it really gets you in the feelings, right? It's very visceral. You experience it unfolding over time. Same with a lot of mediums evolve over time, and I think that gives them a chance to have a kind of narrative structure and build up to a catharsis. And one of the things about painting that can make it quite low key is it's just perfectly, eternally what it is. And there's some attempts at creating narrative by how your eyes move around a piece or the order in which you see things, but in some sense it's a static object, and that could make it, like, I think a lot of people, if they are being totally honest with themselves, just think painting is more boring than other forms of art. That like almost everyone most people love music or films or like even reading books or whatever. And I think a lot of people feel a sense that painting is something they should like more than they do. And even I feel that sometimes. You can be walking around a museum and kind of realize you're like a little bit bored. So I feel it's really important that something about the drawing invites you in to have a kind of sequential experience with it. You maybe start to see new layers to it or reinterpret it in different ways. And I am not saying this is what I'm aspiring to, you know. I think it's very difficult to do, but my favorite art does that, because I think if it leaves a few questions and you leave the museum and it's the one thing you're still thinking about on the car ride home, and it makes you want to come back and look at it again, like that, I think that's when something really sticks with you. So that's what I'm always trying to aim for, is it has to be a little bit unresolved so that you can kind of linger on it, have it stick in your mind, look at it again, and maybe like you come back in a few years and you see it totally differently, having gone through something else. So
yeah, some work that makes you think. I mean, that's powerful if it gets stuck in your head in that way. How do you usually arrive at your ideas for, you know, new works? Do you have a daily sketch routine? You have other brainstorming activities?
Yeah, I would that's what I would do if I was smart. I go through phases where I do that. But honestly, it's the most painful part of the process. You know, mostly when I'm in the middle of something that I know I like, and I know that I just have like weeks ahead of me of the tinkering, problem solving work of like, I'm just going to slowly, piece by piece, you know, one day I'm going to work on plants, you know, blah, blah, blah. That is like my lowest anxiety. I go to bed, I'm excited to wake up and come in and work on that thing again. I feel like I have a purpose in life. I'll let myself fully give into the delusion that this painting really matters somehow, cosmically. You know, I really will. I know it's absurd, but when I'm in the studio, I'll let myself really feel like it really matters that I make this. This is the purpose of my life. This is, and completion is often the bursting of that bubble and being like, oh my God, I've been in another psychosis. You know? But that's the happiest time for me. And the hardest is if I fully run out of things to work on and I have to just generate new ideas. Because, that's just where all the ugly self-doubt comes up. That's where all the like, have I had all my good ideas? Oh, this just looks like a caricature of me. I don't have anything else to say. I've said it all. Like, I'm never going to have another one. But I've felt that enough times now that I know to actually just think of it as part of the whole process of making them. But what I do, is I, whether it's either a sketchbook or sometimes I just put a really big piece of paper on my drawing board, and you can't wait to have an idea. You'll be waiting forever. You know, I think when you look at a lot of artists who have been very like influential, most of them are extremely prolific. There is a kind of sense of like, you just produce, like if you feel like you're stuck, just produce more mediocre stuff, and eventually you'll kind of through the grace of whatever, you know, you'll find something good. So it's definitely a kind of very shotgun attempt. I basically, usually I sit down now and I start by drawing from imagination, and I'm trying to draw poses or body language that feel evocative of an emotion to me. And then I start playing with really dumb ideas, you know, like I'll just be like literally like a caricature of me. Like, what if she had really long fingers? Or what if there was a hole here? And then you look at it and you're like, well, that looks like a dumb one. Move on to the next one, draw again. And then what starts happening is when you've got like 4 or 5 on a page, you might suddenly be like, I really like this pose, but what I did to it is stupid. But that idea I had over there, suddenly I start seeing. I think for me, it's very hard I can't just bring up mental imagery in my head, but I think I'm quite good at pulling connections between, if I give myself a little smorgasbord of different ideas, it's the recombining. And then sometimes I'll have my page and nothing on there's good. And then I'll just go grab an old sketchbook and I'll start looking at other pages I did on different days. And then you start thinking, that was almost a good idea, but the pose sucked. It was boring. And then, you know, and then what I start doing is I shoot reference of basically it's always myself and my girlfriend. That's why they always look the same. Yeah. Somehow the face has become a blend of a feminized version of myself and her. And I think that's just because my work isn't really about specific identity. So it's become a shorthand for a person. And I'm aware, sometimes I feel insecure that it's really corny. Like I'll just be like, it's just another, you know, there is the cliche of the sort of like white dude drawing conventionally attractive young woman. And I do that actually, I think about that a lot. Like sometimes that it makes my work feel shallow, but I guess it has just become my shorthand for, like, if I draw a face from imagination at this point, I just draw the face. And I'm really, my creative process is focusing on what is happening to the subject and where they are. And I think that's why my work will never be very significant to a fine art community, because I think it does kind of make it a bit cheesy. But I feel like there's enough people who get what I'm trying to say. I hope like the emotional expression is coming through. At this point, it's like it would be hard to switch it up. I don't know what I would, to just suddenly start. Maybe I could go through the process of hiring models and trying to diversify. But when you've been doing the same thing for so long, I worry that everyone will get hung up on like, why is this image with this kind of person? Does that mean something in context to the rest? And then I started noticing that this is actually what so many artists do. Like a lot of painters that I love kind of have a figure or like a very narrow range. Like it's actually, I might be being too hard on myself. I think most people kind of draw a person often that looks like themselves, unless the work itself is about narrative and different characters. Because like no one in my work is a character. They're not a specific person from a specific thing. So I did start to notice a lot of painters do that. And I thought, okay, I don't have to. You can come up with a million ways to critique yourself, and maybe it deserves more critique, but my creative process is very much about like what is happening to this person and what that means to me, what it could represent. And then once I feel like I've found a thing, it's a kind of alchemical distillation process. Like I think about what the important thing happening in this image is, and then I'm using all the tools I've learned in visual communication and composition and lighting and whatever to like, how do I really emphasize that feeling, that mood? And often a lot of that is stripping away stuff that is unnecessary, getting rid of distraction in the composition, and just trying to make it extremely focused so that when you look at it, you're just kind of instantly like, whoa, you know, you want that kind of boom, clear read at a small size.
So as you're working through these decisions, developing the composition, what form does that take? Is that just new sketches, like just iterative sketching?
A bit of iterative sketching from imagination, a lot of trying to think laterally for a while, trying to think like, could I completely change the angle? Could I change the perspective? Could I change the lighting? Like big changes. And then at some point when you're kind of locked in and you have a direction, the process becomes about a kind of linear execution to get the technical level that I want. So then it becomes about, I kind of follow the process that I read in this Russian realist painting thing, where it was like sketch from imagination till you have the motif, and then refine your sketch through a series of iterative, explorations, and then hiring models or shooting reference, kind of modern version, and re-sketching the idea. But now with reference, you start coming across like, oh, okay, well, that's going to create a tangent if I'm doing this effect like this, like, then shooting reference again, like figuring out the little stupid minutia of like, okay, the shoulder has to be just here, or the way I've done this cutaway creates a shape that just doesn't read well. There's a lot of like focusing on clarity and mood boarding out, looking for paintings that have tackled similar technical subject matter, similar lighting scenarios, similar palettes for ideas about how I could solve certain things, sort of going from this idea and now gathering everything I need. I'll basically look at my sketch and I'll be like, okay, there's going to be running water in this. I need to know how I'm going to handle the running water, where the light's coming from, how the reflections are going to work, what they're going to do tonally to the composition. If I want her to be lit from this side and it's this kind of water and the reflection's going to be here, is that going to create any weird shapes? Okay, maybe I change the light this way, or I place some trees in the background so there's a dark reflection and that reads better. It's all of these kind of like, I'm thinking in terms of solving the composition for very clear and nicely balanced tonal shapes and line and rhythm. So I want things like maximum contrast at the focal points. I want it to be effortless. Like if you're going to draw something surreal and unexpected, that you need to reduce confusion. Otherwise people will just kind of move on and not get what they're looking at. So the kind of the weirder or more surreal the idea is, the higher the need to solve all of these things correctly so that people can understand what they're looking at. Because I have this feeling that when people are walking through a gallery or scrolling on social media, you have like, if you lose people in that first second, they just don't come back. I have that experience in a gallery where if you just look at a painting and you have to kind of try to figure out what's going on, like maybe I'm just lazy and dumb, but it loses me.
So focusing in, so like, you have this particular surreal element that you want people to focus on. In order for them to focus on that, you have to make everything else like super tight so that it's not distracting or confusing to them. Yeah. That's sort of what you're saying.
Exactly. And also just like aesthetically pleasing and visually beautiful. Yeah, there is a sense of that I want, I'll be looking, and I'm always leaving room for like happy accidents. Like I kind of put myself in a paranoia mindset where it's kind of like, I don't really believe it. I'm quite boring. I don't have very many woo beliefs. I think a lot of people think I'd be into like astrology and The Secret and stuff, but I'm not. But I will walk around in the world, and it's a kind of exercise in, every day you are receiving just streams of sensory information that is flowing through you. And if you walk through the world saying like, I am going to find the thing that will help me solve my current painting, most of what you see in the world will not be that interesting. And then I'll be sat on a train platform and like the light will suddenly be coming through the sleeve of someone's jacket as they're like waving at a friend. And I'll be like, oh, that kind of backlighting would work so well. Or I'll see like some plants on a walk and I'll be like, that is the tree that needs to be in this painting. So it's kind of like I try to filter my direct experience of the world around me. And, because life is the master artist aesthetically. Right. Like the thing you learn from life drawing is just that the world is like stunningly beautiful aesthetically. Like everything you want to capture as a painter, life is doing effortlessly 24/7 better than you ever will. And so I try to always leave a little bit open to finding those like surprise coincidences that are going to really like make this painting better. And I find that if you're open to them, they kind of tend to happen. And it also nicely means that your work starts to, I think if you're pulling your direct experience of the world into your artwork, there's a kind of inherent, it helps give you a voice that is like very authentically your own, because it's kind of, it helps to reduce the amount that you're being like overly influenced by your idols and stuff like that, because it's coming from your little window into the universe.
And so as far as like materials go, you use, both graphite and oil. Is there something that goes into the decision of which you're going to use? Is that subject to what the focus of the painting is going to be? Or like what helps you decide what medium you're ultimately going to use in the final piece?
Mostly laziness and impatience. Like there's so many things that probably would have made a better painting, but you have to stretch the canvas. There's so much more prep work in making an oil painting. And I think at many points in my life, I've not had a great studio space. And I kind of got started on the graphite thing because it was a way for me to be making traditional art without needing, and they're small. Like most of my drawings are like way smaller than people think. And it's because it's habitual from being able to work at a desk or at a coffee shop or something. But I've kind of committed in my head, and I'm sure I will fail on this, that I'm going to be entering a painting season, because I do feel like that there's so much. It's kind of amazing how few paintings I've made in the last 6 or 7 years. It really is only like a handful, and I get the feeling that there's just a lot. There's so much for me to learn there, and that would changing medium really does change a lot about the kind of work you make. It ends up like my graphite work and my oil work don't have the same sense of atmosphere, and it's not intentional. It just comes from things I don't fully understand in how you end up using different mediums. So it's the same with actually one thing when I was talking earlier about frustration, about maybe feeling like I'm making the same work over and over again. When I gave you the kind of rundown of my process, I think I know in the back of my mind that if I wanted to really challenge myself to grow, I would have to maybe radically mix up how I even start. Do I have to start from a pose? Could I try like just a totally different process? But it's, it's always difficult to jump into the unknown like that. And so I think I've found something that works for me and feels like a satisfying way to express myself. And so I've done a lot of just doing that because I want to be producing the next piece. I want to have something going on. but I do feel like I have a bit of space now to step back and think about like quite radically if there are different ways to express myself. But yeah.
Yeah, you were saying earlier, I mean, when we first started, that the time that you have taken off, now that you're getting back into it, you're kind of thinking, am I in the same place in my life to where the themes that I want to talk about are the same, or have those changed? So like, has that changed your relationship, not only in terms of your process, but in terms of what you want to say with your art?
Yeah, I don't know. I have this theory that that there's like a several year lag on what comes out in my artwork. I mean, it's a meaningless theory, but it sort of has a ring of truth about it. Like, I do find that there are themes in a lot of my work that I'm still pulling from experiences in my early 20s that don't actually represent what I'm going through currently, but things that have stuck with me over the years. And I get the feeling that a lot of the stuff around parenthood is very hard to think about ways to do it that don't come across as... I mean, I often feel like the stakes in the kind of work I do is like cheesiness or cringe. like when you're trying to be really sincere, like think about Nickelback, right? Music that a lot of people love, but a lot of people, it's almost stereotypically thought of as kind of cringe. But if you think about the message of "Let's Take Photograph" by Nickelback, you know, isn't it nice to isn't it strange to look at old pictures and realize that you've all, you know, grown older and things have changed, and don't you miss the old times? Like, who doesn't relate to that? There's nothing wrong with the message, but cringe is when someone is trying to compel you to feel a way, and you somehow feel that their delivery or their process has not allowed you to become absorbed in their message, and there's a kind of tension there that is uncomfortable. It's sincerity that isn't landing for you. And I think part of me feels like you kind of have to let go of it as an artist, because someone is always going to not like what you're doing, or is going to find it a little cringe, as they say, not based. And sorry, I don't know why I'm talking like this. That's not how I talk. But, and there are many times where I'll sit back and I'll be like, am I the Nickelback of drawing? Like, my work is so intensely sincere that I sometimes wonder if it was music, would I even like it, you know? But it's just what comes out when I'm trying to be honest about my experiences. And that's another hard part about being an artist, is something can really mean something to you in the moment, and then you can have these moments where you just radically want to disown it. You're showing it to someone, and it really meant something to you at the time, and in that specific moment, when you're talking to a buyer, you don't feel it anymore, but you have to own it, you know, in front of people. And that kind of stuff that is one of the sides that really starts to mess with your head, when it's like the weird downside you don't anticipate of a lot of people seeing your work is when stuff leaves your kind of little audience. And if something goes viral online, you start getting the mean comments or the people who specifically don't like it, and you just have to not let that stop you from doing it. Like, ultimately, Nickelback have had a great creative career. Like, they've played in a band they love, they've lived off of it, and I'm sure they're all happy with themselves. And all these like music nerds like me as a pretentious teenager going on about how it's not cool. Like, what does it matter? Like, they said stuff that meant something to them.
We're still saying their name in 2023, so I mean, that says it all.
Yeah, so I feel like you gotta, a lot of trying to make this kind of work is like, you have to let go a little bit of how you could anticipate every possible person perceiving it. And it's okay to just be who you are, and to be a limited human, and just, if it means something to you and you're feeling it and you can get into it while you're making it. And ultimately, honestly, you know, if you don't enjoy the experience of making your work, what is the point? Because every time you finish something, you just got to make another one. And this, if you're going to be an artist, this is the experiences that your life is made of. So the thing I'm ultimately searching for in my sketching and everything is just something that I want to draw. Like, it has to, I'm just looking for an idea that I think I'm going to enjoy the experience of making. I'm going to like looking at it. I'm going to put on some music I like. I'm going to, you know, and I'm going to enjoy my time in the studio. And you kind of have to surrender a lot of the other stuff, because it is kind of out of your hands.
And just trust that if you're drawing something that really comes from your heart and that you want to draw, that other people will also appreciate it.
Yeah. most of the pieces that seem to have resonated the most with people have been ones that I've genuinely felt a little bit anxious to share, because I felt like, have I finally gone too crazy? And that's
too Nickelback.
Let's look at a performer like Prince or someone, like an incredible musician, like to get up on stage in those outfits, to like the screaming and strange vocals on Purple Rain as an album. Like, I don't know if you know the song, I'm going to blank on it in this moment. It doesn't matter. But, you know, he has moments that I hate that I'm going to sound like a contestant on The Bachelor now, you know, how therapy speak has penetrated our world, but the vulnerability shown is really impressive to me. And I think a lot of what I look for in artists is people who pull it off. And I think it's amazing the ways it can be pulled off. And I think that is when art genuinely serves a functional role in the world. Like, it's not just a trivial thing for people to like chit chat over at a gallery opening. Like a painting or a song or whatever can be something. It's not going to save anyone's life. It's not going to fix the deep problems in our world. But I think all of it collectively, the creative output, it for me made the world better to live in. And I feel like your goal as an artist is just to be doing stuff that can provide those kind of experiences to people. And that doesn't have to be you don't have to be super heavy and serious. Like, some work is just so joyful or fun or playful that it just makes you smile, or, you know, it's just so cool. You know, I have friends who work more in the stuff they do is just ridiculously cool. It doesn't make it's not about having deep thoughts. It's about just capturing an aesthetic. And in the you know, I like it. Maybe it's my karma to be cringe, but I like artists who it's just so nice. You know, something can just be so nice. So I do think that it's all in everything we're doing here is we're putting symbols and images and whatever onto a piece of paper. It's an infinite game. You could show me anything and I'm going to make something. And the meaning is it's the kind of internal psychic energies we're sharing with each other, you know. I don't have a better word for it. It's I don't even think of it as escapism, really, because I think that's the stuff that reality is made of. I think people unfairly call art escapism. You know, like Lord of the Rings isn't escapism to me. It's about themes that are relevant in real life, you know? And you can see that. That's why it's lasted with people. Like, and it's the cynical thing is to be like, oh, this is how we distract ourselves on our inevitable road to death. But I'm like, no, I mean, this is how people talk about and deal with like fear of carrying a burden or the power of friendship, you know, and like that stuff is amazing. So I think that's what you got to be aspiring to is just making work that means something to you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well said. And so on that note, let's talk about what you have coming up. You mentioned earlier that you had a show planned for around this time, but that it had been put off.
Yeah.
So do you have enough? I mean, are you in a place where you know enough about what it's going to be to talk about it?
Sort of. I mean, that's the big choice, right? Like I have, because I was going to have a show in 2020 and then I can't remember what happened, but something happened that year and it got cancelled.
The whole world fell apart a little bit.
Yeah. So I started doing some group shows from some of the work, but I basically have for the gallery space, I have a show's worth of work right now. But the choice we're making is whether I've started reaching a point in my life where I want to think about keeping some of my work, because I sometimes get sad thinking about having none of it. But that's always hard because the work you want to keep is the work that most belongs in a show. You know, Sure. It's kind of hard. The question for me right now is I'm either going to have a show that will just kind of be because my work is all quite thematically similar, it's either going to be just kind of a medley from the last few years presented together and getting to be seen, or I'm going to see if over the next year I start to produce work that maybe the show will end up being something that emerges that more belongs together, and then some of this work will go in group shows and maybe some of it I'll keep. But I'm not on that kind of level where I'm coming up with like a like when I thought about theming my show, I just want to theme it exactly the same thing my first show was about. Like I'm still in a sense making work that is in the same category. So I don't know.
when you're, I mean, in terms of themes for shows, do you like, it sounds like what you just described is that you like to just work and let the theme kind of organically become whatever the work dictates, rather than identifying a theme up front and then working according to that theme.
I am just fundamentally not a planner as a person. You know, it's like really what I want out of life is to be able to afford to go out to eat without worrying about it, to have the rent paid, and to get to draw all the time. And I often tell myself I should be sitting down and thinking of some really clever way of presenting the next batch of work, but I just want to come into the studio and draw. I want to release the prints. I want to do a show every now and then. It's not something I have a vision for yet, you know, where I think about, okay, I'm going to do this next phase and it's going to be about X. And, you know, maybe that's my creative limitation, you know, like I look at, you know, when you get your sort of artist jealousy, I'm often in awe at the complexity of the kind of projects and worlds people conjure, you know, whether they're like someone who writes a book or directs a movie or makes a series of paintings around a thing. I often feel like very keenly aware that they're doing stuff I am not capable of doing. I just feel like I kind of have my lane and I really enjoy it, and I'm very happy that other people like to see the stuff I make, you know. And I'm trying to, a lot of my, you know, career is just figuring out a way to make sure that can, you know, pay the bills. Well, I don't know how I should feel about that. I don't know if that's like creative laziness, like is that something I'm supposed to want to change, or is, you know, part of me just feels like I kind of just want to be like radically accepting of it, you know. I like the work I do and that's just how I do it, and maybe just own that, you know.
Awesome. Do you have a target for like how for the show next year? Do you have a target for like how big you want it to be, how many pieces you want to have?
I think it's kind of fundamentally dictated a bit by the size of the space. It's not a huge space, so it's going to be more about, I really just want to bring the heat, you know. I want it to be all classics.
Right.
I don't know, I feel like every artist has a secret internal tier list that you can't share because, you know, you want them all to sell or something. But I feel like there are definitely works of mine that I feel like, okay, this is what I really want to lead with if I was like showing people, you know, my best work. And then there are works that I feel like I made because I liked them and I wanted, you know, it was better than not doing anything for that month. But, you know, a lot of my thing is just making sure I'm always producing something. And I feel like I'm not, every time I try to be like, okay, it's only going to be bangers from now on, that just leads to like nothing happening.
Right. It's too
because
much pressure.
You can't sit there with a piece of paper being like, oh, no, I'm really going to make the tearjerker piece that really impresses people with my emotional depth. All you do is just produce cliche and nothing. So I feel like my job is just to keep making stuff, and, you know, what will be, will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Which of Ken's galleries is this one going to be at?
I think it's at a relatively new thing of his in New York called Harmon Projects. That's the current plan. I think I'm allowed to share that. I think we've said that publicly. I can't imagine that it affects anyone anyway, even if I wasn't supposed to. But I think I'm pretty sure that is the space. And it looks like a cool, I was about to say Lower East Side, like I know New Manhattan. I think that's where it is, but I don't know.
Is it later part of next year, early part of next year? Has that been?
I think late next year. Yeah, and we're hoping we started doing the work this year of compiling everything I've done over the last 8 years to produce a really beautiful like hardcover book to come out alongside it, where it's my work but then compiled with like thumbnail sketches and early stuff, so you can kind of see like super high res close-ups of stuff on one page and then the image next to the like sketches that led to it. So. And then, like, they have a beautiful publishing company as part of his whole, you know, world. So, yes, we were aiming to do it this year, but over the summer with the girls, and I'm trying to get the book ready and trying to think about the gallery, it just became very clear to me that, like, I was existing in a state of constant stress of my own design. I was like, the show doesn't have to be this year. Like,
right.
there's had to be a lot of surrendering to my human limitedness with kids. Like, it's just hard. It's not even just time, it's just like energy to do stuff. You know, I would get into the studio and have my like 4 hours for the day, and I would sit down in quiet for the first time, and my brain was like, go to sleep. You need to sleep.
Right.
Like, I just can't work like I'm 18 anymore, you know.
Other than this new show, do you have anything else coming up that you want to put up people's radars, like group shows, print releases, stuff like that?
Not really. I mean, but yeah, always. Okay, I could be better than that. I mean, I'm working on getting a kind of always on merchier level store set up. So not like the fine art prints that are signed and numbered, but like mini prints and postcards and stickers and stuff. If like someone really wants to just like have something small and casual without, you know, like an even lower price point. So keep an eye out for that. But I mean, for anything that I release, it's just, I have a mailing list and you won't be getting spammed. I really just send emails when there's stuff available, and, you know, leave if you get bored of getting them. And that's linked on my website. And otherwise, actually the one thing I'd love to draw more attention to as an experiment, when I was looking at all of this generative AI stuff, I started to realize going into the future, it was quite important for me to share more of the experience of making a work of art. You know, that it's not just about having an image, but that a huge amount for me is that, like, there's so much meaning in having gone through the process of pulling this thing out of your head. And I felt like going forwards, I wanted to start producing videos to kind of share that in a fun way. And as an experiment, I made a really needlessly long, but it turns out making something short is way harder than making it long. But it's like an hour long. But if you're into it, if you've got a couple of lunch breaks, I think it's pretty good. And I made a video on my YouTube channel over a recent drawing. And yeah, if you are feeling generous with your time, I'd love more people to check that out. I think I could send you a link later to have it somewhere.
Absolutely. Do you feel like you'll do more content like that, where it's more like instructional stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Like, as I'm starting to get into more of a regular routine, like, it's been so long since I've been creating that I basically realized that, like, trying to get back into creating and like managing a camera and the editing, it was just like making me not want to draw. And I felt like that, well, that's not worth it. But I'm hoping that as I settle into more regular routines again, I do want to start recording stuff more often. It's just it's so much work editing videos. It's crazy. It like doubles. It like took as long to edit the video as to make the drawings. So it like I was thinking like, okay, do I want to half my artistic output for the rest of my life? Like, if I'm doing this, like, if I don't get faster, I'm just deciding to produce half the paintings for the rest of my life, and that doesn't feel worth it. So if I think I'm going to try to find ways to condense it a bit, make it a more watchable 20-minute kind of thing, be more careful about what actually goes into the camera, and find ways to, like, you know, make that workflow less horrifying. Yes, I definitely want to, because I loved teaching. I love sharing that stuff. I think it's and I love watching YouTube stuff. James Gurney. Oh, if you want to get inspired about drawing and painting, just go on a Gurney journey and watch some of his his life painting videos. They're incredible. And they add so much to it. I watch one of them and I'm like ready to go paint. And I strongly feel like if I could do that for other people, that would be a good thing. And obviously, like, if it's working well, it can be a good part of, you know, you can be sort of sponsoring yourself, you know, advertising your merch and prints or whatever. But
right.
This last video was like an insane amount of work. It felt like there was a very positive reception from the people who saw it, but I'd sort of made it in a way that was never going to capture new people. Like, you had to already be kind of a diehard to be like, oh, a 15-minute video. Yeah, I'll watch that.
Right.
So I feel like maybe you have to earn trust from, because there are like a lot of YouTubers who make long videos, but I think it's kind of earned over a long time. People suddenly realize, like, because there are people who upload and I'll see it's an hour long and I'm like, yeah, let's go. You know, that's my next
right.
2 lunch breaks. But I don't think you can start there. So, I'm just, you know, I'm very keenly aware of my own limitations, and
sure.
And I didn't want to sacrifice painting time just yet, but I hope to find ways to make that work.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll include links to that in the show notes as well. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh, I just thought of one pick, but I know he hates doing interviews because he didn't want to talk to me. Oh, maybe he'd talk to you, but I really love this painter, Aaron Weisenfeld. I think he's amazing. What's his name? Xu Jie, spelled Xuejiye, is a Chinese painter who I just find his work endlessly fascinating. He'll go on these kind of exploratory tangents where he sort of finds like a theme and he'll kind of mine it for months, and then he'll radically switch it up and do something else. But I find his work really interesting. I'd love to hear more about his process and how he's had a long career. He's been painting for ages. I'd have tons of questions for him.
Awesome. Great choices. Well, thank you so much. And Miles, thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. This has been a real treat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun to get a chance to blabber in people's ears. But thank you. Yeah, and thanks for listening.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Miles. I thought it was really interesting how Miles compared the way that he's trying to evoke an emotion in his viewers and create a mood to how music can create an atmosphere and connect with you on an emotional level. And I guess in the same way that some music tells a story and expresses a message, while at the same time other types of music is all about the powerful emotions that it creates in you, visual art can take those different forms too. It can be a vehicle for telling a story, but it can also just create an atmosphere or evoke an emotion. Miles is clearly more interested in using his art to create a connection with his viewers on a really emotional level. And for me, it's always been the music in movies that had that kind of emotional impact that stuck with me the most, and that I naturally gravitate towards. I was happy to hear that he's starting to get back into his art practice after having taken some time off to be a new dad. The show he has coming up at Harmon Project should be an excellent body of work. It sounds like it could consist of, some of the works that he'd originally planned to show, and it was planned for this year. Or, between now and then, he might create a bunch more that develops into a whole new body of work. Either way, it sounds like he's aiming to make this a truly memorable experience. So follow Miles' Instagram, or better yet, sign up for his newsletter to learn more about the new show as it gets closer. So thanks again to Miles for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.